This is question number 2 on the practice homework 1. I want to, in addition to providing you some solutions to this question, I also want to use this question as an example to show you how to correctly apply the rounding requirements in MBC in order to get the precisely correct answers, at least the answers as acceptable by MBC. Because as you will find out, sometimes even if your answer is just one decimal place off from the correct answer, quote unquote correct answer acceptable by MBC, your answer will still be marked as incorrect. So in order to get the strictly correct answers by MBC, we need to follow the rounding requirements very strictly. For example, for this question, access the financial reports of the fiscal year ending in 2018 at SEC website for Medtronic and Boston Scientific, 2 competitors in the medical device industry. A, use data from the company's balance sheets and income statements to complete the following table. Round answers to the nearest median. If you look at this table, you see that we have the total assets beginning of the fiscal year, end of the fiscal year. We have the net income, which is consolidated, and revenue. And we also need to calculate the average total assets based on these first 2 numbers. So sometimes if the average turns out to have decimal place, this rounding requirement will be important, right? Because it asks you to round to the nearest median without keeping the decimal place, or you need to round the decimal place, right? If it's above 5. And if you look at the rounding requirement for part B, it says use rounded answers from above to compute answers. So that means we need to use actually somewhat incorrect or imprecise numbers to do the subsequent calculations in MBC. Rather than using the precise numbers, for example, for the average total assets may include the decimal place, but this part of the rounding requirement asks us to round answers to the nearest median without keeping the decimal place. And this part B further says we need to use the rounded answers from this part to do the calculations. So that's where we need to be super careful in order to get the strict, precisely correct answers, quote unquote, precisely correct answers acceptable by MBC. So let me first copy this table to my Excel. So copy and then paste. And then you see that it added several additional lines which I need to delete. All right, to save you some time, I have already deleted all the extra lines and extra words. Just copy from the setup. So now let me check the 2 companies. One is the Medtronic. So it turns out here I need to check the first one. The other options you can find out it doesn't apply. So here it asks us to get the fiscal year ending in 2018. So that means this is for the annual report. And we know that for the annual report, we need to check for the 10K. So search for the 10K. And it turns out that for this question, actually the answers in MBC are wrong in the sense that the correct answers, we should look for 2019, the filing date, because this date is about fiscal year 2018. But it turns out if you use the 2019 filing date, this information, the numbers from these financial statements there, the answers will not be correct. So we need to use the 2018 June 22nd, the filing date. since my purpose here is to show you, my major purpose here is to show you how to correctly apply the rounding requirements in MBC. So let me just use this round year because that will be marked as correct. In a sense, not in the sense that not because of the rounding requirement, but because of the round year. So it doesn't affect my major purpose. That's why I follow that. So I first need to get the total assets, right? Because that's the beginning of the year, end of the year. So beginning of the year is like the end of the last fiscal year, right? So the total assets here, I just copy the number here. That's the beginning of the year. And then I copy the end of the year. So before I do the average total assets calculation, I also want to get the information from the income statement for this company. So I get the statement of income, and first number I want to get is the net sales. So if you look at, by the way, I forgot to mention that the numbers here are already in $1 million on the balance sheet. But for the statement of income, you can see that the numbers actually are not in the millions, other than the shares. Shares are in the millions, but it doesn't mention the numbers are in millions. So we should assume that these numbers are in dollar terms. So we need to be converting all these numbers into $1 million by dividing the numbers by 1 million. So if you do that, I will just get this number. This is my revenue. I also want to get the sale, net income. So net income here, I have two numbers. One is net income, another one is net income attributable to Medtronic. And that's where this consolidated here matters. Yeah, consolidated means that I should add the non-controlling interest for this, right? So that's why this number here is the number I should copy, net income. All right, so this number turns out the original format was in percentage term. That's why it's become so weird. Okay, so that's the company, that's the first company. And the second company is Boston Scientific here. So I can just click on this one. Again, search for 10K. And for this company, the date is correct. I should look for 2019, February 19th. Click on the interactive data. This is about fiscal year 2018. And financial statements, first go to consolidated balance sheet and check the numbers already in $1 million. So I don't have to worry about converting the numbers. So I just first copy the beginning of the year number to my Excel sheet, and then copy the end of the year. It's right here, end of the year. And then let's go to the income statement and sales. Again, this is already $1 million, so I don't have to convert it. Sales, and then net income. Here, I don't have to worry about the distinction between the net income and the net income attributable to the parent company, because there looks like for this company, it doesn't have any parent company, right? Just have one net income there. So again, change the format. So that's basically all the numbers I need. So now I need to calculate the average total assets. So the normal way is just to use the average of these two numbers, right? I have the average function in Excel. And here it's also correct because the average number of these two numbers turns out to be an integer. So it doesn't matter. But for the Boston Scientific, you can see that the average will not be an integer anymore, right? So if you pull the cell here, you'll see that the number here is still doesn't have any decimal place. But the reason is because I choose to keep, when I format cells, I choose to keep 0 decimal place. But this is only for showing purpose. When Excel actually does the calculation, it actually still uses the precise number. And in this case, the precise number has the decimal place, right? 0.5 actually. So in order to get the precise number for whatever, under whatever situation, I want to introduce another function in Excel, which is the round function. The round function will round any number to the desired number of decimal places. So in this case, if you check the rounding requirement by the setup, you'll see that it says round answers to the nearest median, right? It's round to the keep no decimal place. So 0 decimal place. And now if you pull the cell to the right, and you can see that it will round to the correct following the rounding requirement. And in addition, the numbers here are not only showing the format by formatting the cells, but actually this is the final rounded number because we have used the round function. So this is the answers for the first part. So the rest of the job is simply for me to copy the numbers back to MBC. So I just do that. Okay, I'm done copying the answers. Part B, calculate the following ratios for each company. Here, as we mentioned, use rounded answers from above to compute answers. That's where I was super careful because when we did the calculation for the average total assets, we have the distinction between the rounded answers and more precise numbers. Yeah. So now we don't have to worry about that because we have used the round function to do this calculation. And round ROA and PM to 1 decimal place. And round AT as the turnover to 2 decimal places. And if you look at the table here, both ROA and PM has the percentage sign. So here, when the setup says round to 1 decimal place, in terms of the number, we actually should round to 3 decimal places, right? That's where when we put the number into the percentage format, it will round to 1 decimal place. Okay, so that's where we need to be a little bit careful. So ROA, first, ROA is defined to be net income divided by average total assets, right? So it's net income divided by average total assets. So now we can manually round this, right? Putting this to be 3.2 by putting 1 decimal place before the percentage sign. But that's not very beautiful because in this case, it doesn't matter because this is the final step for the calculation. But if subsequent calculations will use the numbers from this step, and it will further says use rounded answers from this step for the subsequent calculations, then this will not be very nice because this, again, this is simply showing even here, the manually keeping the number of these decimal places, there's not applicable there. But if I choose to keep first format this to be in percentage term, and then keep 1 decimal place, but it's just showing this as 3.2. When Excel does the calculation, it actually uses the precise number as we just used. So I don't want to do that. What I want to do is to use the round function. And again, I need to round this to 3 decimal places for the reason we just explained. And we still show the same number. Yeah. But now these numbers are rounded number rather than simply showing the rounded decimal format. Okay, so now I can pull the cell to the right. And that's the convenience of using Excel. And for the PM, pre-PM is net income divided by sales, right? And we can do the similar sense, keep the format to be percentage and keep 1 decimal place. But again, for the same reason, I want to use the round function and keep this to be 3 decimal place. And put the cell to the right for the other company. And finally, AT here, we don't use the percentage sign as we just used. So here, I just have to worry about keeping the number of decimal places according to the rounding requirement, which is 2. So asset turnover is defined to be revenue, right, divided by average total assets. So I want to keep this to use the round requirement and round this to be 2 decimal place and then put the cell to the right. So the rest of the job is to copy the number back. Okay, when I say copy, actually for the percentage sign, I cannot copy because I will copy the percentage sign, but here it already has the percentage sign. So I just type it 8.3 and this is 10.3 and this is 17. And then for the AT, I can copy. So we're done with the calculation. And then let's finish this question. Which company has the better ROA? Better, we just copy the compare the ROA. It's Boston Scientific, right? So D, which of the following is true? As compared to Boston Scientific, Medtronic has a better profit margin. That's obviously not correct because the profit margin of the Medtronic is lower than Boston Scientific, right? So 2, as compared to Boston Scientific, Medtronic has a weaker profit margin and a weaker asset turnover. Profit margin, we know that's true, asset turnover, and this turns out also to be true, right? So even without looking at the other choices, we can see that 2 is correct. So now let's check our answer. Yeah, you can see that by strictly following the rounding requirements, especially by using the round function in Excel, we can get the precisely answers as marked correct by MBC.